free speech. Is it under attack, as some claim? And why is it that many of the loudest voices complaining about limits on free speech then go on to limit free speech themselves? Are we just a bunch of hypocrites on this issue? Or is something else at play? 0345 606 973, the number, whatever you want to say. I think we should start by getting a handle on what we mean by free speech. Do we accept that free speech is not an absolute, that it must exist within boundaries, within legal boundaries? You can't have people standing outside your bedroom shouting abuse at you in the middle of the night. Nobody would tolerate that. Keir Starmer tried to explain it to Trump on Thursday, but Donald Trump, he only wanted to talk about Jimmy Kimmel.
Well, Jimmy Kimmel was fired because he had bad ratings more than anything else, and he said a horrible thing about a great gentleman known as Charlie Kirk. And Jimmy Kimmel is not a talented person. He had very bad ratings, and they should have fired him a long time ago. So, you can call that free speech or not. He was fired for lack of talent.
This country's had free speech for a very, very long time. It is part of who we are as a country, and it is the values that we fought for. We fought for it during the Second World War alongside each other. So we need no reminding of the importance of free speech in this country.
Keir Starmer went on to give the example of paedophilia, the promotion of paedophilia, something that would have to be limited by law, which was an interesting choice of subject, seeing as his guest is still on the hook back home over just how friendly he was with the billionaire paedophile Jeffrey Epstein. And for the first time in a long time, Trump had nothing to say. Of course, we don't just curb paedophiles' rights to free speech. Governments have an obligation to prohibit hate speech and incitement, both of which are dangerous. Restrictions can also be justified if they protect specific public interest or the rights and reputations of others. Any restrictions on freedom of speech and freedom of expression, though, must be set out clearly in law so everyone can understand them, right? I presume that's why a woman called Lucy Connolly pleaded guilty to a charge of inciting racial hatred. Her tweet in the wake of the Southport killings crossed the line. It read, "Mass deportation now, set fire to all the effing hotels full of word I can't say, so full of the so-and-sos, for all I care. If that makes me racist, so be it." And since leaving jail early, she's been lauded by our right-wing newspapers, given interviews on freedom of speech in which she claims she was a political prisoner of Keir Starmer, which is patent nonsense, but she has every right to say such stuff if she wants to. It's freedom of speech, innit? Saying you want to burn down a hotel with migrants in it crosses the line. That's hate speech. Saying the Prime Minister is keeping you a political prisoner, freedom of speech. I must admit, I found it worrying to have Trump's sidekick J.D. Vance lecture us on freedom of speech this summer while saying nothing as countless US workers lost their jobs, not just journalists, for daring to post anything vaguely critical of the late Charlie Kirk, who said some pretty vile stuff himself while alive. You've got teachers, firefighters, military personnel all getting fired for airing their views. Were they guilty of hate speech? Well, that may be the impression some of you have, but here's one example. A high school counsellor who got fired for a post which alluded to Kirk's position expressed in 2023 that it was worth it to have some gun deaths every single year to protect the God-given right of gun ownership. 37 years in public education, the counsellor wrote, adding, "Ready to take a bullet for my kids. No, I'm not shedding a tear. He chose to sacrifice himself for the rights to be protected. Calm as a bitch." Is that hate speech? Not to me. Not to me, it isn't. What about Jimmy Kimmel, then, the TV host who's been persistently critical of Trump? This is what got him suspended indefinitely by ABC.
We hit some new lows over the weekend with the MAGA gang desperately trying to characterize this kid who murdered Charlie Kirk as anything other than one of them and doing everything they can to score political points from it. In between the finger-pointing, there was grieving. On Friday, the White House flew the flags at half-staff, which got some criticism. But on a human level, you can see how hard the president is taking this.
Condolences on the loss of your friend Charlie Kirk. May I ask, sir, personally, how are you holding up over the last day and a half, sir?
I think very good. And by the way, right there, you see all the trucks. They've just started construction of the new ballroom for the White House, which is something they've been trying to get, as you know, for about 150 years, and it's going to be a beauty.
Yes. He's at the fourth stage of grief, construction. There's demolition, construction. This is not how an adult grieves the murder of someone he called a friend. This is how a 4-year-old mourns a goldfish.
Donald Trump suggested on Thursday that TV networks which cover him negatively could be punished by his government after his celebration of the suspension of Jimmy Kimmel. That's the same Donald Trump who says he stands for free speech. Can any of you make sense of this? You know, why do so many self-styled defenders of free speech ban critics whenever they can? Reform have been accused of banning newspapers like Byline Times from conference and ordering councillors not to speak to critical hacks. According to Reform's deputy leader, the UAE-based Richard Tice, this only happens when the journalists become activists. But there's no law to support the banning of journalists perceived to be activists. One might say that's just censorship. It's also interesting to note how some of the loudest voices on freedom of speech can't manage a whisper when it comes to scenes of hundreds of old ladies being arrested for wearing T-shirts opposing genocide and other stuff like Palestine Action, which you're not allowed to voice support for, as Palestine Action is a prescribed non-violent terrorist organisation. Is free speech under attack in this country? Or is free speech just another hill for culture warriors to die on? 0345 6060 973 is the number. Though I often hear, free speech is under attack. I wonder if any of you can find the wherewithal to define what kind of things you want to say but can't say. And we'll find out whether they might cross the line into hate speech. That'll be an interesting experience. 0345 6060 973, the number. I'm joined first by a former head of religion and ethics at the BBC, now Professor of Media at the University of Greater Manchester. That's Professor Aaqil Ahmed. Good morning to you, Aaqil.
Morning.
Why is free speech such a heated subject right now in this day and age?
Well, I think your summary was very good, Matthew, in the sense that actually it's because people want it to be, don't they? And I think particularly when you're looking at the J.D. Vances of this world and the people of a similar kind of persuasion in Europe as well, they seem to be obsessed with this, but it's actually from the point of view of being able to attack what they call a big state, or people control, or a nanny state, or people controlling what you're allowed to say or what you're allowed to think. And I think it's part of a bigger point they want to make, which is the way of life that we have is under attack, and we've never been allowed, and we're not allowed to kind of like discuss that. We're not allowed to kind of like talk about particular kind of taboos. We're not allowed to talk about Muslims. We're not allowed to talk about migration. Well, quite frankly, if you look at the papers and any kind of particular conversation, that's all we ever talk about.
Absolutely.
You know, and so therefore, I think they're using it for their own particular means, and actually to silence any kind of dissent, because, as you said, we have laws and regulations in this country, not about freedom of speech essentially, but we have laws and regulations about hatred, about bullying and harassment, about whatever, inciting to murder, whatever these kind of things are. And when somebody can say or do something which taps into that, it's illegal. It's not hate speech, it's actually breaking the law. And I think that's the kind of thing that actually we're looking at here. We're looking at people using things and using language to get their own finger crossed. What that may be, we can have a discussion about, but actually what they're trying to do is control subjects and make people believe that they're under attack, when quite frankly, in this country, in comparison to other countries, we don't have anywhere near the problem with freedom of speech. If anybody has a problem, it's in America right now, let's be honest.
The bit that I kind of struggle with in the debate is the loudest voices about criticising lack of free speech in the country are themselves guilty of censorship and limiting free speech. I'm hard-pressed to think of an example who doesn't have a sort of hypocritical past on free speech.
Well, these are the same people that say they're always being silenced and that they're never out of the TV and radio studios, quite frankly. And it's actually the thing. The people who say they don't have a voice are the ones who always have the biggest voice. And with regards to freedom of speech, well, that's because they want to be able to, as I said, it's a tool they can use in these culture wars, whatever you want to call it. It's a tool they use. But ultimately, do they want everybody else to have freedom of speech? I don't think they do, because the minute you've seen it with regards to reform, banning journalists, and there's a reason why they ban the Byline Times. It's because Byline Times keep on finding stuff out about them. So the fact of the matter is they don't like it. They don't like it when it, all those kind of cliches from, Dad's Army, they don't like it up and whatever. They don't like it when it actually affects them. And I think when it comes to freedom of speech, I think it's just a load of rubbish, because ultimately, Matthew, let's be honest with you, it's one person's definition of what freedom of speech is. And you're right, speech. You know, nobody is up in arms about the freedom of speech being curtailed, of people wanting to dissent against something which they see as being really, really barbaric, and that's what's going on in Gaza, or what may be going on in other particular countries around the world as well. And you're not allowed to have any dissent anymore. So dissent is actually what I think is being attacked, not freedom of speech.
Oh, I like that, Professor Ahmed. May I ask, is it? I worry that the powers that be haven't done a very good job of pushing back against the narrative of restrictions of freedom of speech. So even with Donald Trump, I thought Keir Starmer is initial. You know, it's something we treasure very. You know, we value it. Just it sounded a little lame. How do we turn this aspect, this front in the culture wars around? Can it be turned around?
Well, I think the Lucy Connolly thing tells you that actually you're probably on a hiding to nothing if you try and uphold the laws and regulations with regards to, you know, inciting harm and etc. Because if somebody says something as, I mean, yeah, whether or not you think going to jail is the correct thing to do, you know, but if people are burning down migrant hotels, etc., and people die in that particular because of it, and you can then go back to a particular person who's inciting that, then it's a difficult position to be in going forward. But I think the problem we have is that because so many people have this vested interest in creating a situation where people feel that there's this attack on freedom of speech, we're not allowed to talk about certain things, certain groups, particular groups with particular characteristics have protection from actually being criticised. All of this starts to make you think, I don't quite understand where we're going with this. It's, you know, you could argue when you talk about the you know, Keir Starmer and any government, actually, for that matter, not wanting to implement certain kind of regulations, things that they may in opposition, for instance, you know, the government talks about. Islamophobia and anti-Semitism kind of definitions, but they've not been able to implement the Islamophobia one since they've become a government, not because they disagree, I'm telling you, it's because they're scared about what the reaction will be from the free speech warriors who's saying you're not allowed to be critical. Well, at the moment, you're still not allowed to be hateful because under you know, the bullying and harassment and all these kind of rules and regulations that we have, criticizing someone because of their religious belief is illegal as well anyway. So therefore, you know, being prejudiced, I should say, because of their religious belief is illegal anyway. So the fact of the matter is we have these rules and regulations that people are sort of terrified of. We don't really implement them that much, do we, in this country? Because we know there's a particular kind of line, and when you cross it, you get punished. And I think that they're trying to use this as another vehicle, because ultimately, you know, with such poor cultural literacy, media literacy, whatever you want to call it, I think people don't understand that some of the things that they're being fed into this vacuum are not helpful at all. And actually, if you sat down and thought about it, how much of it makes any sense?
Well, Professor Ahmed, I mean, that is taking us into an area that I am very interested in.